in that hour afterwards, not to mention the 24-hour burn that you have. It kind of dies off hour by hour over the course of 24 hours, but if you can burn an extra 150 calories the hour after you've worked out, that adds up, and that makes that exercise much more worth it.
HIIT protocol?
Yeah, the two most common types of interval training are, which you'll hear termed HIIT training, high intensity interval training. Basically, you're doing a 2-to-1 ratio where it's, the example I think given here was a 200-meter sprint, then you walk 100 meters, and you run 200 meters, you walk 100 meters. You spend your time in a ratio basically of 2-to-1 work, spending 2/3 of your time working, 1/3 of your time resting. It's a very, very efficient way to get through your workout. You're not wasting a lot of time. It's high intensity. It's going to burn a lot of calories in that 2/3 of the time that you're in there. So if you're in the gym for 30 minutes doing HIIT training, you are working hard for 20 minutes of that time. In that half hour, you're going to be able to burn what most of us would probably burn in a typical gym session in an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours. Plus you get that excess post-exercise oxygen consumption on top of it. So the other type is what we call Tabatas, or Tabata interval training. And it's kind of the same idea. It's a 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off, 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off. That's something that I love to do. You do it for 8 rounds, 4 minutes total. Basically, the idea with this interval training is that it needs to be high intensity. With the Tabata, if you get through the 4th 20-second bout and you're not about ready to quit, if you're now wondering how you're going to get to the end of it, you're probably not working hard enough. But it should be exhausting, and that 8th one is going to be agony. But in 4 minutes, you've done as much work as most people would do in a half hour on a treadmill.
The whole point to these two is making the most efficient use of your time. For those of us that don't want to spend a lot of time in the gym, Chad wouldn't recommend doing an hour of cardio multiple times a week. Do your HIIT training, do your Tabata training, because that post-exercise oxygen consumption really is a time saver.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about cortisol and hormone levels and getting your body into that anabolic state where it's going to increase your muscle mass and increase your ability to burn fat throughout the other hours of the day. And this interval training, this high intensity training, will trigger your body to do that, as opposed to long endurance cardio, which really does the opposite effect and kind of shuts your body down and causes you to increase your fat stores. The higher intensity training, again, the leanest athletes on the planet are sprinters and fighters, and people who do this sort of training day in and day out.
What time length are you recommending for like this training? I had a program that by the time you do the warm-up and the cool-down, it's probably 45-50 minutes. Can I do less than that, as long as the intensity is up there?
In my opinion, yeah.
Would you recommend using a heart rate monitor or something to monitor your intensity? I mean, you sometimes feel like you're working really hard and you're not really working heart rate wise, or you just
a lot of the heart rate is going to be determined by what muscles you're using. If you're doing HIIT training with squats, your heart rate's going to get up there. You're using large muscles, large oxygen demand, whereas if you're doing bicep curls, your heart rate might not get up that high. It's a fairly small muscle in comparison.
So it's not
HIIT training, I think there might be some confusion. High intensity interval training can be done on an elliptical, it can be done on a treadmill, it can be cardio machine based, it can be on a track doing sprints. It's just the time length, the work to rest ratio. Or it can be done with squats followed by mountain climbers. So weighted exercise followed by a calisthenic, right? But my recommendations, I would always do 2 longer bouts of cardio a week, 35 to 50 minutes. And you can even get up there for an hour if it's more of a walk or hill inclines where your heart rate is pretty steady. We call those steady state workouts. High intensity interval training, Tabata workouts are going to be great 1 to 3 times a week. You can start to overtrain doing that type of training and increase your fat stores just as you could going too many times a week. So it's a well thought out balance.
And with those longer sessions, the lower intensity sessions, they may not be done in the gym at all. That may be a day where you, if you like to go hiking, you go out and something that's lower intensity, that's a little bit less stressful on the body, it still gets you out, gets you moving. A lot of times trainers or coaches will call that active rest. Basically just maintaining the fitness level that you're at. You're not really working on increasing your fitness, you're maintaining where you're at, you're burning some calories, you're giving your body a chance to recover, avoiding those stress injuries.
And recommendations are going to be based on a person's body type. So I might recommend something for you that I wouldn't recommend for you, Allison or Susan, from a cardio standpoint.
Yeah, but so can it be high intensity with a low heart rate?
No.
Okay. So
No.
why wouldn't you?
I mean, the whole point to the rest ratio is to decrease that
Right.
heart rate, right?
Right.
So-
So why wouldn't a heart rate monitor, if you're sitting there doing biceps versus squats? You know what I'm saying?
But again, that's from the strength training or HIIT training standpoint with weights. That's not necessarily
Right.
HIIT training if you were combining
Okay.
those two.
Yeah, if you're doing, HIIT training or Tabata training, your cardio, in that 20 seconds, it's a total body exercise, so your heart
Right.
rate is going to get up.
Okay, that's what I thought you were saying, you said biceps, I don't get that.
But from a heart rate monitor
Sorry.
standpoint, yes, it is good to monitor your heart rate to make sure you're not up in the 170s for, an
Right,
extended
and by the
period
same
of time.
token, sometimes you feel like you're about to drop dead and you look and it's, I'm only 148.
Right.
Suck it up a little.
Right. And I think, when you're doing HIIT training, you're going to feel when your heart rate's really up there, right? It's more those steady state intervals. You're really trying to go a little bit longer distance and you want to stay underneath your anaerobic threshold that I think where a heart rate monitor becomes really important.
Yeah, okay.
Other questions on HIIT training? Interval training, high intensity, anaerobics, nutrition.
I've seen calories that are diet plans that give you recommended number of servings, X servings of fat per day, and they define what a serving is.
Yep.
X servings of carbohydrates. Are those as effective, or do you really want to count calories?
As long as you're very, usually those servings, if you're looking at like a diabetic diet, there's a set number of carbohydrates that are in a serving. And if you're going over a serving or under a serving, I would expect a person to acknowledge that or to be aware of that and to try and go over or under, roughly the same amount so that at the end of the day it comes out pretty much spot on. So it certainly can work, but you need to be aware of what those servings are and whether or not you're going over the serving or under the serving. If you know what the serving is and you're consuming exactly a serving, you know what that serving holds as far as calories are concerned, so really it's the same thing. It's just a simplified way of counting. If you're having a starch serving, that may be 90 calories versus counting out 90 individual calories, you just get to count to one. But at the end of the day, it's all the same.